They're very good. We're very good. I know Jules for a long time. Jules is he's longer in the club probably than I am. So I met him on my first or second day probably. Since I know him, he's an absolute expert in all things around player scouting, transfers, all these kind of things. He worked very closely together with Michael Edwards in the past. So I don't think there will be any kind of rusty things to overcome. It's just it's a normal thing in life, in business, that people leave the position they were in for a few years and then somebody else has to take over. But in this specific case, the person who takes over did parts of the job already in the past. How it is when you are get promoted from what you do to the assistant sporting director to the sporting director. So I think will be a very smooth takeover.
I mean, you wouldn't know this necessarily, but English football, the idea of a sporting director 10 years ago was almost mocked in England, and it's completely changed now. Could you just mention a little bit more broadly why it is important, you think, for you as a manager to have that person? It never used to be like that in English football. It's completely changed, it feels.
Imagine I would have come here 10 years ago and would have told you that sporting director is really important. So you would have told me again, go back to Germany and deal with that there. It's still a completely different role in England than it is in Germany. In Germany, the sporting director sits on the bench. In Germany, the sporting director is talking in press conferences before the game, after the game, all these kind of things that would never happen here in England. And the CEO of a club speaks in Germany. I think you saw all interviews of Karl-Heinz Rummenigge when he was in that position, or Aki Watzke when he is in that position. So they all do that. It never happened in England. So still a difference. Sporting director. When I came here, I wanted a sporting director. I think that was the reason why Michael had a similar job before, but like why he got the job in the end. Let me say like this, because I don't want to deal every day on a daily basis with players' agents. And I really think that takes energy away from the really important stuff you have to do. I speak to players constantly. I do that, but it's not the right thing that a manager speaks to players about contracts. In my understanding, it's not, because even when a player is very important for you and you give him then the offer he didn't want to hear, like you say, okay, you can earn this and that, and he says, well, I think I'm much more. But these conversations should not happen between the responsible person in all sports things, football things, so you need somebody in between that, and that's for the player it's the agent, for the club it's the sporting director, in my understanding. So that's it. Apart from that, I did what I always did, and it's like we talk about players, but yes, in my first press conference we spoke about the transfer committee, right? So that worked out pretty well since then, I have to say, but it's still the same. Yeah, it's an important job. I really think it's an important job, but there's no influence on my job. But when it was like this in the past, that the managers did all these kind of talks with agents and players, my day is pretty full. I don't know exactly when they did it. But then I'm maybe not skilled for that. I'm the only one who thinks it's not right to do that, but for us it works out how we do it now.